Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes when you realize that it's so much easier than you think it's going to be. I am so excited to share this week's episode because it is with Millie Nicholson, who, along with her co-host Hannah Whitfield, is one of the newest members of Be the Change Media Network. Millie co-hosts a weekly series on the No Longer Legally Detained podcast called Monday Mornings with Millie, and as it says in the name, you can listen to those episodes of her podcast every Monday morning at 10 a.m. GMT. Millie and I recorded this conversation right before we released the first episode of Monday Mornings with Millie, but you can listen to the first and second episodes of her podcast now, wherever you're listening to this podcast. So, without further ado, let's get started with this episode featuring Millie Nicholson.
So, hello, I'm Millie. I am a student at the moment at a drama school in Guildford studying acting, and that's where I met Hannah. Obviously was on our MT foundation last year. Things that interest me, the thing is, Lily, and this is not very good because this probably won't make it, but I'm probably not as interesting as all of the guests that you've had on before.
That is not true. That is not true.
But I definitely don't have all these amazing stories to tell.
No. Everybody has stories to share. I know that for a fact, and that is literally the whole purpose of this podcast and the media network as well. Everybody has stories, and I also know for a fact that you have some to share because I have chatted with you and we've planned this podcast and adding it to the media network together. So I'm actually going to ask you to tell me that story now. Can you tell me about the process to get started with your podcast with Hannah and just what motivated you to want to get started with this project?
I met Hannah last year on our musical theatre foundation in Manchester. And I mean, she is probably the most inspirational person I've ever met. Like, she is like ridiculous, and she's not even on here for her to stop me from saying all of this. But she does so much. So we kind of were always joking about having a podcast because we do like little improv activities at drama school together, and we were like, do you know what, we are actually quite funny sometimes. So we were like, oh, let's do a podcast. And then she, from there, obviously with her activism side of things, really wanted to. And I genuinely feel like since knowing her, I've learned so much about so much, to be honest, about the whole world and neurodivergence. I've learned a lot about myself through her. And so, to be honest, I think it was a big learning for me. And I've said it before, and like it's still quite true for me, that I'm here for fun. I'm just here for the fun of making a podcast with my best friend. But I think she's taught me so much, and there's so much still that I can learn from her. And actually, I think it's quite interesting. I like to think it's quite interesting for other people to hear the stories that we have and her perspective on things. And we come from very different like places in life, and so I think I've found that quite interesting to listen to her experience and get her opinions on my situations and my opinions on hers, and hopefully it's just quite nice to listen to us just yap about our lives, basically.
I think that sounds amazing, and I love that you said that you're in it for the fun, because I think that is the best motivation to get a podcast going and keep it going. And if it's fun, it's something that you look forward to, you're going to keep going with it. So can you give me a sneak peek into some of the topics that you and Hannah are going to be discussing on Monday Mornings with Millie? I'd love for you to give me a little preview of some of the episodes that you've already put together, of course, without giving away too much. But tell me a little bit about some of those episodes.
Yeah, okay. So me and Hannah, for the Monday Mornings with Millie, we're focusing on kind of navigating adulthood, which I say that I'm the grand old age of 21, so really not very far into my adult life, but just that kind of transition period from being a young person into an adult and getting through things like moving away for the first time and things like that, and things that I know that we've both struggled with. So yeah. And then a couple of episodes that we have recorded so far is we've done a lot. I think a lot of our course last year was so much about and I will go on about our course, just be prepared. That's a spoiler for the episodes. You will hear me talk a lot about our foundation last year because it was such a transformational time for me. But I think we learned a lot about kind of ourselves and how just having a deeper understanding about yourself and helping with that. So a lot of our episodes are about that. So we've got episodes coming up about moving away and episodes about being kind to yourself and what that looks like in many different ways. I'd say that's an underlying theme of all of our episodes, but in different ways, in respects to other people, in respects to, I know we've done an episode on loneliness, and yeah, I'd like to think it's just about life in your 20s.
I love that. And I think one that Hannah mentioned to me was the episode that you're putting together on people pleasing and how you both have very different perspectives on that topic.
Yeah, Hannah is like the biggest, no, she's not the biggest not people pleaser, but I am the biggest people pleaser. And Hannah is so much better at taking care of herself in regards to being able to say no. So it's really good. I think that was a really interesting episode for us to record in terms of having slightly different, because she is a people pleaser but in different ways, and it was interesting looking at that from two different perspectives. And also looking actually at about how much I've grown since knowing Hannah in terms of being able to look after myself and actually be like, no, I don't need to please everyone, and people are still going to, the right people are still going to be okay if you say no to them.
I also have a lot of thoughts on that topic, so I can't wait to hear that discussion when it comes out on the podcast. I think that through this whole process of creating the podcast and talking about the challenges that you faced and sharing advice and just doing all of this work, you are definitely making change and raising awareness about important issues. What advice would you want to share with young people who might be listening to this podcast and want to make a change, but they don't know how to get started with that work?
I'd say it's so much easier than you think it's going to be. Like there are parts of it that are hard, and I think so far I've not had to deal with many of the hard parts, and I'm very fortunate for that. But I think, I mean, we've done an episode on youth voice before, and it was kind of doing that. I had the realization, actually, like me and Hannah sitting in my uni accommodation, recording ourselves chat for 20 minutes and then putting it on Spotify for people to listen to, is actually like, that is making change. And there are so many ways that you can do it without it. I don't think anything that anyone who is in the kind of business of making change, nothing that you ever do will ever feel like, oh, I've made a huge change now. But it's actually realizing that the little changes that you are making are all accumulating into one big thing. I think that's another, really just promoting all the episodes we've already done, but we've done an episode called Little Things, which is all about the little things that you do. And there are loads of different topics in it, but one of them is about like making change and like how you help the environment or how you help people who have less of a voice. And it's kind of just that thing of realizing like if you do 10 little things in a week, you've still made change. So you don't have to start big, and you're not necessarily ever gonna change the world in a day, but there are little things that you can do, especially to make your little world around you a better place. So yeah.
I absolutely loved talking with Millie about Monday Mornings with Millie and about the No Longer Legally Detained podcast as a whole. And I've also loved having Millie and Hannah as a part of Be the Change Media Network. It has been so much fun to work with them on this project and bringing it over to Be the Change Media Network. And I'm so excited that you can now listen to episodes of No Longer Legally Detained wherever you get your podcasts. And I really encourage you to go listen to the first couple of episodes that Millie and Hannah have already released. I've even included those links in the description of this episode to make it even easier for you. But before you go listen to one of Hannah and Millie's episodes, I want to just remind you of one piece of advice that Millie shared that really stuck with me. Change comes when you realize that it's so much easier than you think it's going to be. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Millie on Instagram, and I included that link in the description of this episode. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be the Change Media Network. I am working on expanding Be the Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment, because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.